The boat smelled like salt and old rope, and something that had been crying for a long time. She was sitting on the dock with her shoes off and her feet dangling over the edge, and the wood beneath her was splintered and gray, and none of it matched anything about her life. Not the private jet she had stepped off 14 hours ago. Not the corner office on the 42nd floor. Not the name on the side of 3 hospitals and a foundation that had her mother's face on the letterhead. None of it. She had left all that behind on purpose. And now she was sitting here in a borrowed coat that was 2 sizes too big, watching a man who had to be 60 years old haul a net out of the water like it weighed more than his whole body. And she was thinking about how she had not eaten since yesterday morning, and how that was, for the first time in 11 years, entirely her own fault. He did not see her at first. That was the thing about people who work with their hands. They looked at what was in front of them. They did not scan the horizon for strangers. They did not calculate. They just worked, and the work was its own world, and she was outside of it, invisible the way rich people never usually got to be invisible, and she was trying to decide if she liked it when a net came up, and it was almost empty, and the man went very still. She watched him count what was in it. She watched his shoulders drop. And then he looked up and he saw her, and his face did something complicated. And he said, in a voice that had clearly done a lot of living, he said, "You look hungry." She almost lied. That was her first instinct. The instinct of someone who had been trained since childhood to never show need, to never let anyone see the gap, to present only the polished surface. But something about the dock and the salt air and the almost empty net, and the way this man was looking at her, like she was just a person, just a regular person who might be cold and might be hungry. Something about all of it broke that instinct clean in half. "I am," she said. And he nodded like that settled something, and he said, "Then come on. Before we go any further, if this kind of story hits different for you, the kind that makes you feel something real, please subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that bell so you never miss a story. Share this with someone who needs a good cry and a good ending today. And drop a comment below telling me the last time a stranger did something kind for you completely out of nowhere. I read every single one. Now let's go back, because you need to know who these 2 people really are and what it cost them both to end up on that dock. Her name was Vivian Cole, and she had been the most powerful woman in American healthcare for going on 6 years, though she would have been the last person to describe herself that way. She described herself, when she described herself at all, as her mother's daughter, which was both the truest thing about her and the most painful, because her mother, Dr. Margaret Cole, had died 22 months ago in the same hospital that bore her name, in a room surrounded by equipment that her own foundation had funded, and Vivian had held her hand through all of it and had not cried once. Not in front of anyone, because her mother had raised her to be strong, and she confused strong with clothes for so long that by the time Margaret died, Vivian wasn't entirely sure she remembered how to open. The Cole Foundation ran 17 community health clinics across 6 states. It funded pediatric research at 4 universities. It had, in the last fiscal year, provided medical care to over 200,000 people who could not afford it. Vivian had built that, or rather, she had taken what her mother started and multiplied it by every waking hour of her adult life. And the result was something enormous and important and utterly consuming, and she had not taken a single day off in 22 months. Her therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Priya Anand, who had the kind of steady eyes that made you want to confess things, had told her 6 weeks ago that she was going to break. Not might, was going to. The body keeps score. Priya had said, and Vivian had nodded and gone back to work, and ignored it until the morning she stood in her bathroom at 5 a.m., and looked at herself in the mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back. That was when she called her assistant Marcus and told him to clear her calendar for 48 hours. Marcus, who had worked for her for 9 years and who knew better than to ask questions, cleared the calendar and said nothing. What she did not tell him, what she did not tell anyone, was that she was going to spend those 48 hours doing something that her mother had suggested to her once, years ago, in a conversation Vivian had mostly forgotten until that morning in the bathroom. Her mother had said, "Vivian, sometimes you need to go be nobody for a little while. You need to put down the name and the money and the position, and just be a body moving through the world, and see what the world shows you when it doesn't know who you are." Her mother had done it herself, apparently, twice. She had never told Vivian what she found. Vivian had driven 4 hours from Chicago to a small town on Lake Michigan called Harrows Point, which had a population of roughly 800 people and no one who would recognize her face. And she had checked into a motel that cost $47 a night and left her credit card in her car and put $300 in cash in the pocket of her coat she had bought at a Goodwill outside of Milwaukee. And she had set out to be nobody for 2 days. She was 17 hours in when she ended up on the dock. She had spent the previous evening eating a $5 slice of pizza from a place that was also a video rental store, which she hadn't known still existed, and talking to a woman named Bet who was 73 and had opinions about everything and asked Vivian no questions at all, which was either rude or the greatest gift anyone had given her in years. She had actually slept, in the motel room with the thin walls and a loud heater, slept in a way she hadn't in months, dreamless and heavy, and woken up at 7 to the sound of gulls and gone to find coffee and found the dock instead. She had not planned to sit down. She had just looked at the water and the early morning light on it, and something in her chest had loosened by about 1/4 degree, and she had taken off her shoes and sat down before she made a conscious decision to do so. She was still sitting there when the man and his boat came in. His name, she would learn, was Gerald Broussard, though everyone in Harrows Point called him Jerry, and he was 58 years old, which was older than he looked from a distance and younger than he moved up close. He had the kind of face that had started out handsome and then life had worked on it, the way weather works on good wood, so that the result was something more interesting than handsome, something that had texture and history and the particular dignity of a person who has not been spared. His hands were enormous and scarred in several places, and he wore a wedding ring, though Vivian would not notice that until later, and he moved with the slowness of a man in moderate pain who has decided not to let the pain be the main thing. He had been fishing this lake for 31 years. He had learned from his father, who learned from his father, and the Broussard family had been part of Harrows Point so long that there were 3 streets with variations of the name. The fishing had been good. Once, the lake had been abundant in the way that things are abundant before people figure out how to take too much from them, and Jerry had made a decent living. Not a luxurious one, but decent, enough to raise a family and keep a house and feel that basic rightness of a life that matches the shape of the person living it. The last 4 years had been different. He didn't fully understand why, or rather, he understood some of it. The warming water, the invasive species, the commercial operations that took more than their share, the politics of it that he'd tried to follow, and then stopped following because it made him feel helpless in a way that was worse than just not knowing. But understanding the reason didn't change the result. The catches were smaller. Some weeks they were barely worth the fuel to go out. He had a part-time job now at the hardware store, 3 days a week, and he told himself it was fine, and mostly he believed it. What made the last 4 years harder to carry was that he was carrying them alone. His wife, Nora, had died 4 years and 3 months ago. Ovarian cancer. Fast and merciless. The kind that doesn't give you time to prepare. The kind that takes a person from present to gone in 9 months and leaves behind a silence so large you keep walking into it by accident. She had been 54. She had been, in Jerry's private vocabulary, the explanation for everything good that had ever happened to him. He had 2 kids, both grown, both gone. His son in Atlanta working in logistics, his daughter in Portland doing something with sustainable packaging that Jerry didn't entirely follow but was proud of anyway. They called, they worried, they offered repeatedly to have him come stay with them, and he told them repeatedly that he was fine, that the lake needed him, that he wasn't going anywhere, and they accepted this because they were his children, and they had learned from him that you don't push past what a person offers. He went out every morning because Nora had loved to watch him leave. She used to stand on their porch with a coffee cup in both hands and watch the truck until it disappeared. And he had looked in the rearview mirror every morning for 26 years and seen her there, and now the porch was empty, and he still looked, still glanced up at the mirror on instinct. And what he saw, there was just a house, just the ordinary sad face of a house without someone in the window, and so he kept going because stopping would mean admitting that the reason for going was gone, and he wasn't ready to do that. He wasn't sure he'd ever be ready. The morning Vivian appeared on his dock, it wasn't officially his dock, it was a public dock at the end of Crane Street, but he'd been using it so long it had taken on the feeling of his. The morning she appeared there, he had gone out at 5:30 and come back at 8 with the smallest catch he'd had in months. 11 fish. 2 of them were undersized, and he threw those back. That left 9. He would keep 6 for himself and sell the other 3 to Mora's, the small restaurant 2 blocks from the waterfront that still bought local when it could, though less and less these days. When he saw the woman sitting on the dock with her feet over the edge, his first thought was that she looked lost, not geographically, the other kind. His second thought was that she looked cold and hungry, and like she was trying very hard not to show it. He had spent 26 years married to a woman with extraordinary instincts about people, and some of it had rubbed off. And what his instincts told him about this woman was that she was the kind of person who needed to be offered something before she'd ever ask. So he offered. She followed him to the small shelter at the edge of the dock, a covered area with a weathered table and a camp stove he kept there, because mornings on the lake were cold most of the year, and coffee was non-negotiable. And he cleaned 2 of the fish with the efficiency of someone who had done it 10,000 times, and he fried them in butter with a little garlic and salt, because that was the way Nora had taught him, and he put them on a paper plate with some crackers from a sleeve he kept in the supply box, and he handed it to the woman and poured 2 cups of coffee from a thermos, and she took the plate and the coffee, and she looked at it for a moment in a way that made him look away, because it was a private look, the look of a person receiving something they needed more than they knew. They ate in silence for a little while. "You come out here a lot?" he asked, not because he expected to see her again, but because silence with a stranger can tip either way, and he was, by nature, a man who preferred the tipping toward words. "First time," she said. "Passing through?" "Sort of." She looked at the water. "I needed to be somewhere nobody knew me." He considered that. Did it work? She almost smiled, still deciding. He told her his name. She told him hers, just Vivian, no last name. And he didn't ask her the last name because why would he? They were strangers on a dock. Last names were for paperwork and funerals. "You fish every day?" she asked. "Every day there's water," he said. "So every day." She looked at the supply box, at the camp stove, at the organized simplicity of the setup. "You love it," she said. It wasn't a question. "More than most things," he said. And then, because he was who he was, he added, "Less than I love my wife." She went still, just for a second. "She's gone?" Vivian asked. "For years," Jerry said. "Give or take." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I'm sorry," and he could tell she meant it, not the automatic way people mean it, but the way a person means it when they have their own grief and recognize the shape of yours. "Thank you," he said. They drank their coffee. A gull landed on the railing 6 feet away and looked at them with the absolute entitlement of gulls, and Jerry tore a piece of cracker and tossed it, and the gull took it and was immediately replaced by 3 more gulls, and Vivian laughed, a real laugh, sudden and unguarded, and Jerry laughed too, and the morning got a little lighter. "Thank you for the fish," she said, when they were done. "Thank you for the company," he said, and meant it. She stood up to go, and then she turned back. "Can I ask you something strange?" "Most things worth asking are," he said. "Why did you feed me? You don't know me. That was your catch. You work for that." He thought about it, really thought about it, the way he thought about things that deserved real thought. "Nora always said a meal shared is never half a meal," he said. "She said it doubles." I never found reason to argue with her. Vivian Cole, who had not cried in front of another human being in 22 months, felt something move through her chest that she did not have a name for yet. It wasn't grief, exactly. It wasn't gratitude, exactly. It was something in between, something that hadn't had space to exist in her life for a very long time. She nodded, swallowed. "Your wife sounds like she was remarkable," she said. "She was the whole thing," Jerry said simply. "The whole thing." Vivian walked back toward town. She did not look back. She was afraid that if she looked back, she would go back. And she wasn't sure she was strong enough for that yet. But she was thinking about what he'd said. She was turning it over the way you turn over something small and beautiful that you found on the beach, looking at every side of it, wondering how it got there, wondering what it cost the person who lost it. She didn't know yet that she would be back. She didn't know yet that he would recognize her. She didn't know yet that the 9 fish and 2 cups of coffee and 1 dead woman's wisdom about meals would change both their lives in ways neither of them could have designed on purpose. She just walked up the street with the borrowed coat around her shoulders and the taste of butter and garlic and something impossibly kind still on her tongue, and she felt For the first time in 22 months, something that might eventually become okay. Let's go back further, because you need to understand what Vivian had built and what it had cost her before you can understand what a doc and a stranger and 9 fish were actually doing to her. Margaret Cole had grown up in rural Georgia, one of 7 children, the daughter of a man who worked 2 jobs and a woman who stretched a dollar until it cried. She had gotten herself to medical school on scholarships in sheer refusal to accept that her circumstances were her ceiling, and she had become a pediatrician, and then a researcher, and then something rarer, a person with the knowledge of a doctor and the heart of someone who remembered what it was to have nothing. She had started the Cole Foundation with $80,000 and a rented office above a dry cleaner in Chicago's South Side. She had been 42. Vivian had been 16, old enough to understand what her mother was doing, but not yet old enough to understand why it required so much of her. What it required was everything. Vivian had watched her mother give everything: time, energy, money, presence, to the foundation, to the clinics, to the patients, to the mission, and she had grown up understanding love as something you showed through action and sacrifice, not through softness. Margaret was not a cold woman. She was warm, ferociously warm, but her warmth expressed itself in doing, in fixing, in building, and Vivian had absorbed this completely. She had gone to Northwestern for undergrad, Harvard for her MBA, and turned down 3 extremely good job offers to come work for her mother's foundation at 24, which everyone except Margaret thought was a waste of a Harvard degree. Margaret had understood. Vivian had understood. It was a thing they never had to explain to each other. For 16 years they had worked side by side, and in that time the foundation had grown into something that Vivian was genuinely proud of. She had the business mind her mother lacked. Margaret had the vision and the moral authority. Together they were something greater than either of them alone, and they had both known it, and the knowing had been a kind of love neither of them spoke directly, but both of them felt. When Margaret got sick, Vivian ran the foundation and managed her mother's care simultaneously. For 9 months, without breaking. She had been present for every treatment, every conversation with every specialist, every hard moment. And she had been the person in the room who asked the right questions and advocated ferociously and held her mother's hand and made sure Margaret Cole died with dignity and love and the full weight of everything she had built around her. And then she had gone back to work. Her assistant Marcus had gently suggested bereavement leave. Her board had gently suggested stepping back. Her therapist had been less gentle. Vivian had listened to all of it, thanked everyone, and gone back to work. Because the work was a thing. The work was a continuation of her mother. The work was the only language she had left. 22 months. Not a day off. Not one. What she hadn't told anyone. Not Marcus, not Priya, not her board, not her very small number of actual friends, was that she was making a mistake. A large one. She had been making it for 22 months, and she knew it and couldn't stop. The Foundation's largest grant, a $30 million project to expand community health access in 3 underserved Midwestern counties, was in trouble. The trouble was partially logistical, contractor issues, municipal delays, the usual friction of large projects, but mostly it was a partnership problem. The project was being co-led by a private healthcare company called Meridian Health Solutions, and Meridian had, over the last 8 months, been quietly shifting the terms and priorities of the partnership in ways that were not illegal, but were not what Margaret had intended, and not what the communities it was supposed to serve actually needed. Vivian knew this. She had known it for 6 months. She had been slow to act because acting would mean a confrontation with Meridian CEO, a man named Douglas Hale, whom she had chosen as a partner 18 months ago and whom she was now afraid she had catastrophically misjudged, and the thought of having made that mistake, of having failed her mother's project because of her own judgment error, was something she had been circling without landing on, the way you circle a truth that is going to hurt. And then, 3 weeks before the morning on the dock, Douglas Hale had done something that made the circling impossible. He had quietly, very quietly, through a subsidiary she'd had to dig to find, purchased a 12% stake in a contracting company doing the expansion work, which meant he was now on both sides of the deal, which meant the delays that had been costing the foundation time and money were, at minimum, not something he was motivated to resolve, which meant that $30 million of her mother's foundation's money was sitting in a partnership with a man who had a financial interest in keeping things slow. She had found this out on a Monday. By Friday, she had verified it 3 times through 3 different sources. On Saturday, she had driven to Harrow's Point. She needed to think. She needed to be nowhere, be no one, get the noise out of her head, and find the clarity that only comes when you're stripped of all the things that normally define your thinking. She needed to decide what to do about Douglas Hale, and she needed to do it without her board pushing one way and her lawyers pushing another and her own exhausted guilt pushing a third. She had not expected to find anything on the dock. She had not expected a man named Jerry Broussard and 9 fish and a dead woman's philosophy about meals. She had not expected, most of all, to recognize something in a stranger's grief that illuminated her own. But she had, and now she was walking up the main street at Harrow's Point with her shoes back on, and the morning fully arrived, gold and cold and clear, and she was thinking about what Jerry had said. The whole thing. She was the whole thing. Vivian had never had that. She had had her work, which was meaningful. She had had her mother, who was gone. She had had, in her 30s, a relationship with a man named Peter who was kind and good and ultimately unable to accept that the foundation would always be the first relationship in her life. And she had let him go because she believed at the time that the work was enough. She was 42 years old, standing on a street in a town she'd never heard of 3 days ago, wearing a coat from a Goodwill. And she was wondering, for the first time in a long time, if she had been wrong about that. Not in a sad way, not yet, just wondering. The question sat in her chest, quiet and patient, the way important questions do. She went to the small diner on the corner, which was called Patty's, and had a hand-lettered sign in the window that said, "Best pie in Harrow's Point," and we're the only ones, so that's not bragging. And she ordered coffee and sat in a booth by the window and thought. She thought about the $30 million. She thought about Douglas Hale's careful, practiced smile. She thought about her mother's face the last time they had talked about the expansion project, the hope in it, the specific joy of a person who has worked their whole life toward something and can see it finally taking real shape. She thought about Jerry Broussard throwing back the undersized fish and keeping the rest, the simple ethics of that, the uncomplicated rightness of a man who knows the rules not because someone made him follow them, but because he understands why they exist. She thought about 9 fish divided between strangers. She was on her 3rd cup of coffee when the door of the diner opened and Jerry came in. He didn't see her at first. He went to the counter and sat on a stool and ordered coffee and what looked like toast, and she watched him exchange a few words with the woman behind the counter. Easy, familiar words, the kind that come from years of small daily presence. And she felt something she couldn't immediately name watching him there, this man with his enormous scar hands wrapped around a coffee cup, at home in this small place, tethered to it by love and loss, and 31 years of mornings. He turned and saw her, and his face did the same complicated thing it had done on the dock, and he raised his cup in a small salute, and she raised hers back, and he tilted his head in a question, and she nodded, and he came over with his coffee and his toast, and sat down across from her in the booth. "You didn't make it very far," he said. "Best pie in Harrow's Point," she said, nodding at the sign. "Is that what kept you?" "That. And I'm still deciding," she said, referencing their earlier conversation, and he nodded like he remembered, like it meant something. The woman from the counter appeared with a slice of apple pie and set it in front of Vivian without being asked. "On the house," said the woman, whose name tag said Patty, obviously, and who was looking at Vivian with the frank, open curiosity of a small-town person unafraid of eye contact. "You look like you need it." "I need it," Vivian confirmed. Patty went back behind the counter. "She does that," Jerry said. "She looks at people and knows what they need. That's a gift." "That's Harrow's Point," he said. "Hard to maintain the armor here. Town's too small." Vivian looked at him. "Is that a warning?" "More of a feature," he said. "Depending on what you're looking for." She ate the pie. It was extraordinary. She told him so. "Don't tell her that," he said. "She'll put on the sign." They sat for a while, the comfortable silence of people who have already passed the awkward threshold. Outside, the town was waking up. A few cars, a woman walking a dog that was mostly ears, a kid on a bicycle going somewhere with the purposeful speed of someone on a mission. Vivian watched all of it. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "You asked me something strange this morning, and I survived it," he said. "What do you do when you know you have to do something hard, and you keep not doing it?" He considered this the way he had considered everything she'd asked. Seriously, without deflection. Nora used to say that we put things off because we're afraid of what we'll have to feel when we do them, he said. Not afraid of doing the hard thing. Afraid of the feeling that comes after. Vivian went still. She was usually right about that kind of thing. He added, what do you do with the feeling when it comes? Feel it, he said, like it was simple. Just feel it. Turns out feelings don't actually kill you. I know that's not a popular answer. She laughed, a small one. No, it's not. The hard thing you're avoiding, he said. Is it about work? Yes. Is it also about more than work? She looked at him. You're perceptive for a fisherman. And you're deflecting for a woman who says she wants to put the armor down, he said, not unkindly. Something moved across her face. She looked back out the window. Yes, she said quietly. It's also about more than work. He nodded, didn't push. They finished their coffee. He had to get to the hardware store. She thanked him. He said not to mention it. She watched him walk out the door and up the street, and the dog with mostly ears ran up to him, and he crouched down and let it investigate his hands, and then scratched its head with the kind of uncomplicated tenderness that goes straight through whatever defenses a person thinks they built. Vivian paid her bill and left a tip that was, for a woman trying to be nobody, perhaps a little too large, and she went back to the motel and sat on a thin bedspread and called Marcus. I need you to set up a meeting with the full board for Thursday, she said. And I need the complete file on our Meridian partnership. Everything. I'll send you specifics. Of course, Marcus said. Are you okay? Getting there, she said, which was true, which was, for the first time in a very long time, actually true. She spent the rest of the afternoon walking. Harrow's Point was a kind of small town that had clearly been more than it currently was. A few storefronts that were closed, a movie theater that was now a church, the particular wistfulness of a place that had peaked before most of its current residents were born. But it also had, underneath the wistfulness, a stubbornness that Vivian found she respected. The diner was full at noon. The hardware store, when she walked past it, had 3 customers. The small grocery had a handwritten sign about a community potluck on Friday. People were here. They were staying. They had decided, in the way that people in small places have to actively decide, to keep the place alive. She thought about the 17 clinics her foundation ran. She thought about the communities around them. Not the abstractions of the communities, not the data points and demographic profiles she spent her days surrounded by, but the actual people, the Jerry Broussards of those places, the people with scarred hands and complicated faces, and dead spouses and small catches, and the simple, unasked-for generosity of someone who knows what hunger looks like. She sat on a bench near what had once been a park and thought about her mother, not about Margaret Cole, the institution builder, not about Dr. Cole, the physician, or the philanthropist, or the icon she had somewhat improbably become after her death. She thought about her mother, the woman who made her do her homework at the kitchen table and burned the rice approximately 40% of the time and sang off-key to Aretha Franklin and cried every single time at the end of Old Yeller, even though she had seen it at least a dozen times, and said, every single time, I knew that was going to happen, as if foreknowledge and feeling had nothing to do with each other. She thought about the last conversation she'd had with her mother. That was just them, just mother and daughter. Nothing to do with the foundation, or the projects, or the work. It had been 3 weeks before the end, and Margaret had been having a good day, one of the last good days, and they had sat in the hospital room with the window open a crack and talked about nothing in particular. A show they'd both watched, a book Vivian was reading, whether the nurse named Carl reminded them of somebody they couldn't quite place, and it had been ordinary in a way that only things that are ending can be fully ordinary, precious in their plain unremarkableness. And Vivian had not known it was the last conversation like that, and maybe that was a mercy. She had been trying, for 22 months, to make her life the length of that hospital room, to keep working, keep building, keep doing, because as long as she was doing something her mother would have recognized as good, she was still in relationship with her. She was still in the room. Jerry went to the lake every morning, because Nora had loved to watch him leave. Vivian ran the foundation 7 days a week, because Margaret had built it. They were both. She realized with a quiet certainty that arrived like something she had always known. They were both still talking to someone who couldn't answer. The bench was cold. The park was empty. A leaf skittered across the cracked concrete path and went wherever wind takes things. She sat there for a long time. The second day was when things changed. She had not planned to see Jerry again. She had made her decision about Meridian, or rather she had found a decision she had always known she was going to make and simply been avoiding, and she was leaving Harrow's Point in the morning, and she was going to spend the evening at Patty's having pie and then sleep and drive home and blow up a $30 million partnership that was betraying her mother's work. She was going to feel all the feelings that came after, just like Jerry said. She was at Patty's when she overheard the conversation. Patty was at the counter talking to a man Vivian had not seen before, a heavy-set man in a fleece vest who had the manner of someone accustomed to being listened to. Vivian was in her corner booth at the window, and sound carried in Patty's the way it does in small rooms with hard floors. "I'm just saying it's a good offer," the man was saying, "for a property that's barely breaking even." "Jerry's dock space has been in this town since before you were born," Patty said. She had the tone of a woman who ran her own business, and therefore was not afraid of any man in a fleece vest. "The company isn't interested in the dock, Patty. They're interested in the waterfront. All of it. The dock, the boathouse, the access points. There's a resort development that would bring 200 jobs." "Harrow's Point doesn't need a resort," Patty said. "Harrow's Point needs something," the man said. "Look around." Vivian looked at her pie. She was not part of this conversation. She was nobody here. She was passing through. "Jerry already said no," Patty said. "Jerry said no last month. Things change. The commercial fishing license renewal is coming up, and the committee has some concerns about." "Stop right there," Patty said. "Are you telling me that committee has concerns, or are you telling me someone put concerns in front of committee?" The man in the fleece vest did not answer that. "Get out of my diner," Patty said. Not loud, just final. The man got up, and he looked, as he gathered his jacket, like a person who knew he was going to get what he wanted eventually and was willing to let this round go. That particular look. The patient look of someone with more resources than the person they're trying to move. Vivian knew that look. She had seen it across negotiating tables. She was uncomfortable to admit, possibly wore it herself once or twice. After he left, Patty came to refill her coffee, and Vivian said, "What was that about?" Patty set the coffee pot down and looked at her with those frank eyes. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." Patty sighed. "Development company out of Chicago. They want the waterfront. Jerry's the main holdout. He owns about 40% of the relevant access. Doc rights going back to his grandfather. They've been after him for 2 years. She paused. Now they're going after his license. If the commercial fishing license doesn't get renewed, there's no reason for him to hold on to the waterfront rights. Can they do that? Renewal committee, Patty said. 3 people. One of them is Tommy Reese, who golfs with the development company's Midwest rep. She said this the way small-town people say things are true and outrageous and have nowhere to go. I don't know what's going to happen. Vivian looked at her coffee. Is his license legitimately at risk? She asked. Does he have any issues on record? Jerry Broussard? Patty looked at her like she'd asked if water was wet. In 31 years, he hasn't had one violation. That man follows the rules like they're scripture. Vivian nodded. She did not say anything else. She finished her pie. She paid. She left a tip that was once again, for a woman without her wallet, probably too large. She went back to the motel and sat on a bedspread and opened her laptop, which she had technically brought for emergencies, and spent 2 hours looking at waterfront development regulations in Lake Michigan townships, commercial fishing license renewal processes in Michigan, and the specific legal framework around access rights that predated certain state ordinances. She was not going to get involved. This was not her town. She was nobody here. This was not her problem. She was not going to get involved. She went to the dock at 5:30 the next morning. Jerry's truck was already there. She sat on the dock in the cold dark and waited, and when he came in at 7:30 with a better catch than the previous morning, 14 fish, which he counted was something that might have been relief, he found her there and looked at her and said, "I thought you were leaving." "I was," she said. He tied off the boat and came up and looked at the catch and then looked at her. "Patty called you, didn't she?" he said. Patty doesn't have my number, Vivian said. I overheard something in the diner last night. Then it's none of your business, he said. Not mean, just factual. You're right, she said. It isn't. He started cleaning the fish. I know some people, she said, who know about licensing renewal processes and about development pressure on historical waterfront access rights. I'm not saying I'd get involved. I'm saying if you wanted information. I've got a lawyer, he said. Okay. A good one. Good. He cleaned the fish. She sat. The go was back. Or another go, impossible to tell. They've been circling for 2 years, he said, after a while. The development people. I know. This waterfront is the last working fishing waterfront on this stretch of the lake. Everything else went resort or private in the 90s and early 2000s. He didn't look up from the fish. If this goes, that's it. The last of it. I understand. My grandfather built that boathouse, he said. My father added the dock extension in 1987. Took him 6 months. Did it himself every board. He put down the fish. Nora packed me lunch every day while he was building it. She was 24. She used to come down at noon and we'd sit right there on that dock, and eat her terrible sandwiches and watch him work. Vivian said nothing. Sometimes nothing is the right thing. I'm not selling the waterfront, Jerry said. I don't care what they do to the license. I'll figure out the license. I always figure something out. I know you will, she said. He looked at her then, direct and clear. Why are you here? The real reason. She met his eyes. Because you fed me yesterday when you didn't have to, and I have a skill set that might be useful to you, and it would cost me nothing to share it. And someone once told me that a meal shared is never half a meal. He was quiet for a moment. Then he almost smiled. That was my wife's line, he said. I know, Vivian said. It's a good one. He shook his head. He picked up the fish again. I'm not a charity case, he said. Neither was I yesterday morning, she said. And you fed me anyway. He thought about that. The lawyer's name is Kessler, he said, after a while. Sandra Kessler. She's in Traverse City. I'm not going to call your lawyer, Vivian said. I'm going to write down some things that your lawyer might find useful, if she doesn't already know them. You can give them to her or throw them away. He looked at her. What is it you actually do, he said. For work, if you don't mind. She had been nobody for 36 hours. She had 1 more hour before she had to start being herself again. I run a foundation, she said. Healthcare. It's boring to explain. Is it? He said, in the tone of someone who doesn't entirely believe you. Administratively, yes, she said. He handed her a cup of coffee from a thermos. She took it. 2 creams, she said when she tasted it. I noticed yesterday, he said. She looked at him. He shrugged. I pay attention. She wrote down 4 pages of notes for Sandra Kessler and left them with Jerry before she drove away. And she did not give him her last name, and she did not tell him about the foundation. And she did not say that she was going to make some calls from Chicago that might or might not reach the right ears, because that would have been too much, and it would have broken the careful thing they'd built, which was a friendship between 2 people, in which neither of them was defined by what they had or who they were in the world outside of this dock on this lake. She drove the 4 hours back to Chicago with the windows down even though it was cold, because she needed the air, and she thought about Jerry the whole way home. Not romantically. Not yet. Just the way you think about a person who has shown you something true. She thought about Nora's terrible sandwiches and the dock extension, and what it meant to stay somewhere not because you had to, but because the place was threaded through with every important thing that had ever happened to you. She thought about her mother's office, which she had been unable to bring herself to fully clear out for 22 months, which still had Margaret's diplomas on the wall and Margaret's reading glasses on the desk, and the small framed photograph of a young Margaret at her first clinic, standing in front of the door that said Cole Community Health, and squinting in the sun with a smile so enormous it barely fit on her face. She thought about staying, not in the geographical sense, in the deeper sense, the sense of being fully present in your own life, not running the memory of someone you loved as a substitute for living. She got home at 3 p.m. and walked into her apartment, which was beautiful and expensive and very quiet, and she stood in the middle of it and breathed, and then she went to her desk and started writing a letter to Douglas Hale that she had been not writing for 6 months. It took her 2 hours. She sent it that evening. She felt everything that came after. Jerry had been right. It didn't kill her. What happened with Douglas Hale will be important to the story. So we're going to tell it here, though it did not fully unfold for another 6 weeks. And those 6 weeks contain a number of other things we also need to tell you. She thought about staying, not in the geographical sense, in the deeper sense, the sense of being fully present in your own life, not running the memory of someone you loved as a substitute for living. She got home at 3 in the afternoon and walked into her apartment, which was beautiful and expensive and very quiet, and she stood in the middle of it and breathed, and then she went to her desk and started writing a letter to Douglas Hale that she had been not writing for 6 months. It took her 2 hours. She sent it that evening. She felt everything that came after. Jerry had been right. It didn't kill her. What happened with Douglas Hale will be important to the story. So we're going to tell it here, though it did not fully unfold for another 6 weeks, and those 6 weeks contain a number of other things we also need to tell you. The letter was not the letter Douglas expected. He expected, Vivian knew, either nothing, because maybe she hadn't found a subsidiary, or a quiet lawyer's letter, a negotiated settlement, the kind of institutional conflict resolution that large organizations perform to keep the peace and protect their reputations. He expected Vivian Cole to be strategic, because she was always strategic, because that was her reputation, the composed, calculating woman who always found the most efficient path through a problem. He did not expect what she sent. What she sent was a complete, documented, evidence-supported account of every way in which the partnership had been structured to serve as financial interests at the expense of the communities it was supposed to serve. It was not angry. It was extraordinarily calm. It was a kind of document that a person writes when they have spent 2 days sitting near a lake getting very clear about what actually matters and what is not. And the result was that it had no fat on it, no posturing, no institutional language designed to soften the blow. It was just the facts, arranged in the order of their importance, with a final paragraph that said, in effect, that the partnership was being terminated, that the Cole Foundation would be pursuing the expansion independently with a new contracting process, and that she was making the documentation available to the State Attorney General's office, because she believed there were conflict of interest questions that went beyond what could be resolved between the two parties. Douglas Hale called her at 8:30 the morning after he received it. She let go to voicemail. He called again at 9. She was in her first board meeting by then, the one she had scheduled with Marcus, and she was telling the board everything, which was the other thing she had decided on the dock. No more managing information, to protect her own confidence. No more circling. The board deserved the truth, and they were going to get it, and together they were going to fix it. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. It was at times uncomfortable. There were people on the board who felt they should have been told sooner, and they were right, and she said so. There were people who were worried about the legal exposure, and the lawyers were brought in. There were people who were furious at Douglas Hale, and that was fair, and she let them be furious and didn't manage that either. By the end of the meeting, there was a plan. It was a good plan. It had been built by a room full of people who trusted each other enough to be honest, which was what the board had always been capable of, and which Vivian had been too isolated to draw on for 22 months. She sat in her office afterward and felt something she hadn't felt at work in a very long time. Not relief, exactly. Something more active than relief. Something that had traction. She thought about telling Jerry. And then she thought about the fact that she didn't have his phone number, and that she had not given him hers, and that she was a billionaire with the resources to find anyone on the planet, and that using those resources to track down a fisherman in Harrow's Point to tell him about her day was perhaps a little much. She laughed at herself, alone in her office, for the first time in a very long time. She went back to Harrow's Point 3 weeks later. She told herself it was because she wanted to check on the waterfront situation. This was partially true. She had made some calls, quiet, careful calls to people who owed her favors and who understood the difference between a favor and an intervention. And she wanted to know if anything had shifted. She told herself she was going back because she liked the pie. This was also partially true. She drove up on a Thursday, this time with her real coat and her actual wallet and no particular pretense, because she was not trying to be nobody anymore. She had been somebody all week. She had fired a partner and told her board the truth and started rebuilding a $30 million project from scratch, and she was, all things considered, doing it. She was doing it and feeling all the feelings that came with it, and not dying from any of them. She parked on Crane Street and walked to the dock, and Jerry was there, fixing a net, and he looked up when she arrived, and he did not look surprised. "Thursday," he said. "Hardware store day. I won't keep you." "Sit down," he said. "I've got a few minutes." She sat. The lake was gray today, the sky overcast, and the water moved with a deeper restlessness than it had in the sunshine. She liked it better this way, she decided, more honest. "The license committee meeting was last week," he said, not looking up from a net. "I know," she said. "How did it go?" He glanced up at her. "It went fine," he said carefully. "Interestingly fine. Almost unusually fine. Passed without issue. First time in 3 years they didn't have a comment on my hall logs." "Good," she said. Sandra Kessel was very pleased, he said. She said she had gotten some information about historical precedent on access rights that she hadn't known about. Anonymous source. Vivian said. He looked at her directly then. "I'm not going to ask," he said. "Good," she said. "Because I would just say, I don't know what you're talking about." He shook his head, but not in a bad way. "Thank you," he said. "Simple. Direct. A meal shared," she said. He nodded, went back to the net. They were quiet for a while. The lake moved. A boat came in far down the waterfront, small against the gray sky. "You came back," he said. "I did." "Was that about the license?" She thought about it. She had spent a week getting better at not lying to herself. She applied it now. "Partially," she said. He nodded like he'd expected that. "The thing I was avoiding," she said, "the hard thing at work. I did it. How'd it go?" "Hard," she said, and then better. "Feelings didn't kill you?" "Not yet." He smiled. It was, she noticed, a good smile, not a frequent one. She could tell it wasn't frequent, but a genuinely good one, the kind that rearranges a face entirely. "What's your last name?" he asked. She hesitated, only for a second, but he caught it. "That's okay," he said, easy and unbothered. "You don't have to." "Cole," she said. "Vivian Cole." He went still, not dramatically, just a slight stilling, the way a person goes still when something recalibrates. "The foundation," he said. She watched him. "Cole Foundation," he said. "My daughter did a thing with one of your clinics. In Portland. Volunteer thing. A couple years back. She talked about it a lot." He paused. "She talked about Dr. Margaret Cole a lot." Vivian said nothing. "That's your mother," Jerry said. Not a question. "Was," Vivian said. He looked at her. Something passed between them that was not quite words and did not need to be. "I'm sorry," he said. And she knew, the way she had known with him from the beginning, that he meant it in the full specific way, not the automatic way. "Thank you," she said. He went back to the net. She looked at the lake. "She sounds like she was remarkable," he said, using her own words from 2 weeks ago back to her, and something in her chest cracked open just a little, just enough. "She was the whole thing," Vivian said. She heard him set down the net. "Yeah," he said softly. "Yeah, I know." They sat together on the dock in the gray morning, two people who had each lost the whole thing, and the lake moved and the gull came back, and neither of them said anything else for a while, and it was the most company either of them had felt in a very long time. She came back the next Thursday. She told herself she was monitoring the situation. She was not monitoring anything. She came back because Jerry Broussard was becoming, without any particular plan or announcement, someone she wanted to see. She had thought, driving up, about what that meant. She had thought about it with the same rigor she brought to everything, because she was Vivian Cole, and that was how she was built. She had asked herself, "What are you doing?" And she had answered honestly, "I don't entirely know." And then she had kept driving, because not entirely knowing was something she was trying to get better at. Jerry was in the boathouse when she arrived, replacing a section of flooring that had rotted through. He was on his knees with a pry bar, and there was sawdust in his hair, and he looked up when she appeared in the doorway and said, "You're becoming a regular." "I told you the pie was good," she said. Patty's going to put you on the sign, he said. She sat on an overturned bucket and watched him work for a while. He worked the way he did everything, with complete attention, with the efficiency of deep competence, with no wasted motion. She found it almost meditative to watch. "Tell me about your wife," she said, after a while. He paused, looked at her. "What do you want to know?" What she was like, as a person, not in a summary. Just what was she like? He sat back on his heels and looked at the rotted board he'd pried up. "She was funny," he said. "That's the thing most people don't know, or don't remember, because she was also kind and everyone remembers the kind. But she was funny. Dry. She had this thing where she'd say something completely deadpan and then just look at you, and you'd be half sure she was serious and half sure she was killing herself laughing inside. And usually it was both." He paused. "She drove me crazy in the best way. She always had an opinion. Not a loud one. Not a fighting one. Just, she always knew what she thought, and she wasn't afraid to say it, and she was usually right, which made it simultaneously better and worse." Vivian smiled. "She made the worst sandwiches," he said. "Genuinely. She was a wonderful cook. She could do anything. Make a dinner out of nothing. Feed a crowd. Remember what everyone liked. But sandwiches. I don't know what happened to her. When she made a sandwich. Like something switched off. Too much of one thing. Not enough of another. Bread that didn't go with the filling. And she would present them like they were the best thing she had ever made. Just this confidence." He shook his head. 26 years of terrible sandwiches, and I never said a word." "Why not?" He looked at her. "Because she was excited about them," he said simply. "Every time. Like she cracked the code. How are you going to say anything to that?" Vivian looked at her hands. "That's love," she said. "That's what that is." "Yeah," he said. "That's what that is." She told him. In exchange, about her mother burning the rice. She told him about Old Yeller and the off-key Aretha Franklin. She told him about the morning Margaret had shown up at Vivian's apartment at 7 a.m. with a bag of groceries and cooked brunch for 2 hours and then left without explanation, and how Vivian, who had been in the middle of a professional crisis that she hadn't told her mother about, had eaten the brunch and felt absolutely fine afterward, and had not understood until much later that her mother had known, somehow, that she needed feeding. How does someone know that? Vivian asked. From a distance, without being told. Some people are just tuned to a frequency the rest of us don't pick up, Jerry said. Your mom sounds like she was on that frequency. She was, Vivian said. I've been trying to learn it my whole life. You're doing okay, he said, looking at her directly. You picked up that I was in the water yesterday. She blinked. The water? You said, the situation when you asked about the dock. But you were watching my face to see if it was about something else. To see if I was actually okay. He paused. I was, for the record, just a long week. She looked at him. You pay attention, she said. I noticed that about myself, too, he said, which was such a precisely Jerry thing to say that she laughed. And then he laughed, and the boathouse filled with it, and the sawdust settled, and the gray lake outside did its thing. She came back the next Thursday, and the one after that. By the 5th Thursday, she had stopped pretending she was monitoring anything. She drove to Harrow's Point because she wanted to, and she sat on the dock or in the boathouse or in Patty's diner and talked to Jerry Broussard. And she went home in the late afternoon, and it was the most okay she had felt in years. She had told him about the Meridian situation, in general terms, on the 3rd Thursday. He had listened the way he listened to everything, completely. And he had said at the end that it sounded like she had made the right call, and he could tell it had been hard, and he was glad she'd made it anyway. Your mother would be proud, he said, and she had looked away quickly because it was true, and it hit her somewhere she wasn't fully armored against. She had told him, on the 4th Thursday, that she was thinking about taking a real vacation, a full week, somewhere without her laptop, if possible. Come fish the lake, he said. She had looked at him. I'm serious, he said. First week of November, weather's still good. I'll take you out. You'll be terrible at it, and that's fine. I'll be terrible at it, she agreed. Everyone is, at first, he said. Then you get the hang of it, and it's the best thing you've ever done. She thought about the morning light on the water. She thought about 5:30 a.m., and the particular silence of a lake before the world wakes up. I'll think about it, she said. She thought about it for 6 days and then said yes. What she didn't know, on any of those Thursdays, was that Jerry had known who she was from the beginning, not immediately. He hadn't recognized her on the dock that first morning, not in a borrowed coat with her shoes off and no context. He had just seen a person who was cold and hungry and trying not to show it. But that evening, after the diner, he had gone home and found himself thinking about the name, Vivian, and the foundation she'd mentioned. And something his daughter had said once, something about the woman who ran the Cole Foundation, the way she described her. He had gone, for the first time in years, onto the internet. His laptop was old and slow, and he mostly used it to email his kids, and he had looked up the Cole Foundation. He had found a photograph within about 30 seconds. He had sat with that for a long time. He had decided, by the time he went to sleep that night, that it didn't matter, that the woman on the dock had asked for nothing and given nothing except honesty, and had eaten 2 cups of coffee and a fish dinner and talked to him like a human being, and that was who she was, or at least a real part of who she was, and the rest of it, the name and the foundation and the buildings with her mother's name on them. That was also true, but it wasn't what had been true on the dock. He had decided not to mention it because she clearly hadn't wanted to mention it, and he had spent 26 years with a woman who knew the difference between a thing a person wanted to say and a thing they needed to say, and he had learned from that. And Vivian would tell him when she was ready. She was ready on the 3rd Thursday. He had listened to her say her name and seen on her face the small bracing, the waiting for the reaction, the checking to see if it was going to change, if the dynamic was going to shift, if she was going to stop being just Vivian on the dock and become something more complicated. Cole Foundation, he had said, and that was all. He had not performed recognition. He had not made it a moment. He had just nodded and put the name alongside the person he already knew and let it sit there. He had seen her shoulders drop slightly. He had gone back to the net. This was not nothing to him. He thought about it afterward, thought about it more than he had thought about anything in a while. She had needed to be nobody for a day, and he had fed her and talked to her and treated her like a person on a dock, which was what she was, which was the truest thing she was, and it had mattered to her in a way that was bigger than he understood. He understood it a little now. He understood it the way he understood things that he experienced rather than reasoned through. She carried something very heavy. She had been carrying it alone for a long time, and on the dock she had put it down, just for an hour, and eaten fish and talk about gulls, and he had not asked her to pick it back up. It was the least remarkable thing he had ever done. It was also, apparently, exactly what she had needed. He thought about Nora. He thought about how Nora used to say that the most radical thing one person could do for another was to pay full attention, real attention, no agenda, just full presence. She had practiced it herself, and she had been extraordinary at it, and he had tried to learn it, and he thought maybe he had, or enough of it. He thought about the fact that Vivian was coming back every Thursday. He thought about the fact that he was glad. He had not been glad about a lot of things in 4 years. Not sustained glad, not the kind of gladness that has legs and carries you through a week. He had felt moments of contentment, moments of gratitude. He was not a man who had misplaced his sense of gratitude, but not this kind. He was 58 years old, and he recognized it for what it was, and he was also very careful with it, because he was 58 years old, and he had loved Nora for 26 years, and the idea of caring about someone new felt like walking on ice before you know how thick it is. But he kept making coffee with 2 creams when he heard her car, and she kept coming. The week she came to fish was the first week in November, and the world had gone gold and bronze, and that particular shade of orange that only happens for about 9 days in the upper Midwest before everything turns gray for 6 months. She arrived on a Monday afternoon and checked into the same motel, and she had brought actual fishing clothes this time. She had apparently done research, because she showed up on the dock Tuesday morning in waders and a proper jacket and a hat that was at least 3 sizes too large for her head, and Jerry looked at the hat and said, "Where did you get that?" "Online," she said. "The reviews said it was warm." "It's a child's hat," he said. She touched the brim. It fit. "Vivian," he said. "I have a small head," she said. He didn't say anything else about the hat. He handed her a rod. She was, as predicted, terrible. She had no feel for the line, and her casts were inconsistent, and she startled twice when the boat rocked and had to grab the rail, and after 2 hours she had caught nothing, and she was sitting in the stern with her enormous hat and a cup of coffee, watching him work with an expression of complete contentment. "You're not even trying anymore," he said. "I'm observing," she said, "learning from a master. You're drinking coffee and doing nothing. That's also something I'm learning," she said. "I'm not good at it yet, but I'm practicing." He caught 6 fish that morning and told her she had to hold the net for the last one, and she held the net, and the fish went in it, and she said, "I did it," with a disproportionate triumph that made him laugh so hard he almost lost his balance. They ate lunch on the dock. He had brought sandwiches. She took one bite and said, with her face completely neutral, "These are very good." He gave her a look. "They are," she said, sincerely. "They're bad," he said. "They're not as bad as you think they are," she said carefully, which was diplomatic and also, he could tell, not entirely true. He laughed again. The afternoon did the thing it did in early November in the upper Midwest. The thing where the low sun hits the water at an angle that makes the whole world look like a painting, gold on gray. And she turned her face into it, eyes closed, and he watched her, and she looked entirely different from the woman on the dock that first morning. Or not different, exactly, more present. Less like a person holding something back. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. She opened her eyes. "My mother," she said, "but in a good way. For the first time in a long time, in a good way." He nodded. "I think she would have loved this," Vivian said. She always loved water. She would have been terrible at fishing and not cared at all and probably tried to turn the boat into a floating clinic somehow. Jerry smiled. "Nora would have had opinions about your casting technique." "Was she a fisherwoman?" "No," he said. "She had opinions about everything." "Good opinions?" "Usually better than mine," he said, which she knew and didn't abuse, which was a remarkable part. Vivian looked at him. In the gold light he looked. She noticed this and didn't pretend she didn't. He looked genuinely good. Himself. Fully himself, which was a thing that some people never were. And he was it entirely. "Jerry," she said. "Yeah. I want to tell you something, and I don't know how." He put down his sandwich. Gave her his full attention. She looked at the lake. "When I drove up here the first time," she said, "I was making a decision I couldn't see clearly because I was too close to it and too tired, and I had been running on guilt and work for almost 2 years, and I couldn't feel the edges of anything anymore." She paused. "And then I sat on your dock, and you fed me and said a thing your wife said about meals, and I drove home and I made a decision, and I told the truth to my board, and I started actually dealing with the grief instead of just working through it, and I'm better. I'm genuinely better." He said, "Nothing. Listening. And I'm not sure," she said, "that I would have gotten there on my own, or not when I did. And I've been thinking about how to say that, and every version of it sounds either too small or too large. So I'm just going to say that you changed something for me, and I'm grateful, and I wanted you to know." She looked at him then. Finally, he was quiet for a moment. The lake moved. The gold light held. "Nora used to say something else," he said. "She said that grace moves through people, not from them. That when you do something good for someone, you're not the source of it. You're just the door it moved through." He looked at the water. She said the best thing you could do is keep the door open. Vivian felt something move through her chest. "That means," she said, "that whatever I received on the dock came from somewhere else," he said, "and will keep moving." She sat with that. "She sounded like she was extraordinary," Vivian said. "She was," he said, "and she would have liked you. She had very good taste in people, and she liked anyone who told the truth, even when it cost them something. She would have had opinions about my casting technique," Vivian said. "Extensive opinions," he said. "Daily." She laughed. He laughed. The gold light was going. The sun dropping. The lake going from gold to silver to the deep blue of evening. "I have to ask you something," he said, when the laughing settled. "Okay." "The calls you made. After the first visit. About the license." She waited. "I need to know if the license renewal is solid," he said. "Or if it was solid because someone made calls. And if those calls went away, it would be an issue again." She looked at him directly. "It's solid," she said. "The calls, I'll be honest. I talked to some people who know how these committees work and who understand the legal framework around your grandfather's access rights. That conversation happened. But what came out of it is real. The precedent exists. Sander Kessler knows it now. That doesn't go away. He nodded slowly. I needed to know if I was standing on real ground or borrowed ground, he said. Real, she said. You were always standing on real ground. I just helped your lawyer see what was already there. He nodded. Okay, he said. Okay. Yeah, he said. Okay, thank you. She shook her head. Don't thank me for that. That was... The meal, he said. The meal, she agreed. He drove her back to the motel that evening. She had been going to call a car, but there were no cars in Harrow's Point, and he had offered, and she had gotten in the truck, and the truck smelled like lake water and sawdust and something she couldn't name that was just, she thought, the smell of a life that was consistently itself. He walked her to the door of the motel, which was an old habit from a long marriage. She stood at the door, and they were at the end of something, and the beginning of something else, and they were both aware of it. Same time tomorrow, he said. Same time, she said. She went inside. He drove away. She sat on the bedspread and looked at the ceiling and felt something that was not grief and not loneliness and not ambition and not duty, something quieter and more tentative than any of those, and she was almost certain she had felt it before a long time ago and had not known then how fragile it was. She was careful with it this time. Wednesday they went out again, and she caught a fish. One fish. Small. Technically above the legal size limit, but only just. She held it in both hands and looked at it with an expression of absolute pure delight before Jerry talked her into releasing it. It was small, he said. It was mine, she said. You can catch a bigger one tomorrow. She lowered the fish to the water and opened her hands, and it was gone in half a second, and she looked at where it had been with an expression he would remember for a very long time. That's the whole thing, he said. That's what keeps you coming back. The one that gets away leaves something behind. She looked at him. Is that actually about fishing? It is completely about fishing, he said. Also, it isn't at all. She shook her head. You do that thing, she said, where you say something that's two things at once. Nora called it economical, he said. Nora had good vocabulary, Vivian said. Nora had the best vocabulary, he said. 8th grade education, and she read a book a week her whole life. She would have buried you at Scrabble. I would have let her, Vivian said. He caught that. He looked at her. She looked back, steady and clear, and let him catch it. Yeah, he said. Yeah, she said. They fished. Thursday, their last full day. She was up before the alarm. She was down at the dock before Jerry, which hadn't happened before, and she sat in the cold dark with the water doing what it did in the dark, which was be enormous and indifferent and somehow calming because of it. She had been thinking, in the way she thought about things now, directly, without armor, with the feelings allowed to be there. She had been thinking about what it would mean to care about someone again, what it would require, what it would risk. She had a life that was full and demanding and anchored in Chicago. He had a life that was rooted here in this town, on this water, in a way that some lives grow into a place so deeply that transplanting them would just be damage. She was not 25. She was not someone who believed that love overrode logistics. She had, in fact, built an entire career on the premise that good intentions without structural reality were just sentiment. But she was also not the person who had driven up here in a Goodwill coat. That person had been running so long, she had forgotten what she was running from. This person, the one sitting on the dock in the dark, who had told her boy the truth and felt the feelings and caught one small fish and let it go. This person was trying something different. She heard the truck. She watched him come down to the dock and stop when he saw her, and he stood there for a moment, just looking at her, and she looked back, and neither of them said anything while the dark lake moved around them, and the first dim edge of something that might become morning appeared far out on the horizon. You're early, he said. I couldn't sleep, she said. He came and sat beside her, not across from her, beside her. There was no table here, no camp stove set up yet, just the dock and the dark and the water, and he sat about a foot away, and they both looked at the horizon. I'm going back tomorrow, she said. I know. I have a board meeting Monday, and 12 things that need my attention, and a partnership rebuild that's going to take most of the winter. I know, he said. She looked at him. I want to come back, she said. After, he was quiet for a moment. Vivian, he said. I know it's not simple, she said. I know the things that make it complicated. I'm not asking you to solve those things right now. I'm asking if it's worth trying to solve them. He looked at the horizon. The light was just barely starting. For years ago, he said, I would have said I didn't have a room for something new, that I was full up, that the grief had used all the available space. He paused. I still feel Nora everywhere. I'm going to feel her everywhere for the rest of my life. That doesn't go away, and I'm not going to tell you it goes away. I know, she said. My mother is in every room I walk into. She always will be. So we'd be, he thought about how to say it, full people. Not empty people looking to fill up. Full people with our full lives trying to find where there's a doorway between them. She looked at him. Yes, she said. That's exactly what we'd be. He was quiet for a long time. The horizon got lighter. I'm 58 years old, he said. I'm 42, she said. That doesn't frighten me if it doesn't frighten you. I'm a fisherman in a small town, he said. You run a foundation with 17 clinics. I grew up the daughter of a woman who started a foundation in an office above a dry cleaner, she said. I have no illusions about what matters. He looked at her then, fully. I make bad sandwiches, he said. I know, she said. I noticed they were terrible, she said. I know. I ate the whole thing. Why? He asked. She looked at him, steady and clear. Because you made them, she said. He looked at her for a long time in the growing light. Okay, he said. Yeah, he said. It's worth it. Come back. She exhaled. Something she had been holding for a long time let go. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. The horizon turned gold. The lake went from black to gray to something that wasn't quite blue and wasn't quite silver. A gull appeared, then 3, then a small argument of them, loud and absurd and completely indifferent to everything happening on the dock. Jerry got up and set up the camp stove. She got up and found the rod. Today you're actually going to try, he said. Today I'm going to catch something and keep it, she said. Big talk, he said. Watch me, she said. She caught 2 fish. Neither of them was large. Both of them were legal. She held the second one up for him to see before she put in the bucket. And he shook his head, and she was smiling so hard it looked like it might be permanent. They cleaned and cooked the fish at the camp stove, butter and garlic and salt, the way Nora had taught him, and they ate them on the dock in the November gold. And the pie from Patty's appeared at some point because Patty had apparently seen him from the restaurant and decided to bring herself. And Patty sat with him for 20 minutes and talked about everything and asked Vivian exactly 3 questions, which was remarkably restrained for Patty, and then went back to the diner, and Jerry and Vivian sat there in the clean, cold air and the best pie in Harrow's Point, and a particular piece of people who said a true thing to each other and been met. Tell me something about Nora I don't know yet, Vivian said. He thought about it. She had a theory about clouds, he said. She thought every cloud formation you'd seen more than once meant something, not in a mystical way. She was too practical for mystical, more like she thought the world repeated its patterns, and if you paid attention you could learn to read them. What did the clouds over the lake mean? Depended on the formation, he said. She had a whole system. I never learned it well enough. I wish I had paid more attention. Maybe you learn more than you think, Vivian said. He looked at the sky. There were clouds today, high thin ones, the kind that come before change in weather. She would have said those mean something's coming, he said. Something good or bad? Just something, he said. She didn't usually sort it. She said things are mostly both. Vivian thought about that. Your wife was a philosopher, she said. Fisherman's wife, he said. Same thing, really. You spend enough time watching things, and you start to have thoughts about them. Vivian looked at the clouds. Tell me something about your mother I don't know yet, he said. She thought about it. She kept every letter she ever received, Vivian said. Not emails, actual letters. She had a box for each decade of her life. I went through them after she died. I found letters from patients she'd treated 40 years ago. People she'd helped who had written to say thank you. She had kept everyone. She knew what mattered, he said. She did, Vivian said. I found one from a girl in Georgia. This girl had come to one of the free clinics. This was the early days of the foundation, and my mother had diagnosed something that 3 other doctors had missed, and the girl had written her this letter. She paused. She said, "Because of you, I got to grow up." Just that. Because of you, I got to grow up. She looked at the lake. My mother had underlined it, she said, in red pen, and written in the margin, "This is why." The lake moved. The gull was there, or still there, impossible to say. "That's going on the wall of every clinic," Vivian said. "Not as a monument, just as a reminder. This is why." Jerry nodded, said nothing. Sometimes nothing is right. She left on Friday morning. He walked her to her car on Crane Street, and she opened the trunk and put her bag in and turned around, and they were standing on the street in Harrows Point. Just 2 people on a street in a small town, full people with full lives, and a doorway they had agreed was worth finding. She didn't hug him. She looked at him and he looked at her, and they were both being careful, appropriately careful. The careful people who have had enough loss to know that what you're holding is real. 2 weeks, she said. "I'll be on the dock," he said. "I know," she said. She got in the car. She drove. She looked in the rear-view mirror once, at the end of Crane Street, and he was standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her go. She thought about Nora watching him in the rear-view mirror every morning for 26 years. She thought about what it means to be the person someone watches leave. She drove out of Harrows Point and onto the highway, and somewhere around the second hour, she started crying properly, the way she hadn't cried since her mother died, deep and unglamorous and long overdue, not about anything specific, and about everything, the grief and the years and the fish in the dock and the bad sandwiches and cloud theory and the letter in the box and 2 cups of coffee with 2 creams. And she cried until it was done, and then she drove the rest of the way to Chicago, with the windows down in the November cold, breathing clean air, feeling, underneath everything, something that was quietly, stubbornly, unmistakably okay. She went back in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks after that, she moved her Thursday board calls to Tuesday. She told Marcus she needed Thursdays clear, and Marcus, who had worked for her for 9 years and who had noticed, with profound relief, that she seemed lately like a person who was sleeping and eating and occasionally laughing, set a course and did not ask why. She learned to cast properly. It took about 6 weeks. She caught more fish. She got a hat that fit. She ate more bad sandwiches than could be reasonably justified by any standard of self-care and called them great every time, until the evening she arrived at the dock and there was a different kind of sandwich waiting for her. And she took a bite, and it was genuinely good, and she looked at him. "Did you?" "I watched a video," he said, completely neutrally. "Jerry." "It came up," he said. She ate the whole sandwich and didn't say another word about it, and neither did he. What had changed was that he had looked up a sandwich tutorial, and he would never say why, and she would never need him to. December brought cold that meant real cold, the kind that put ice on the dock overnight, and Jerry couldn't go out as often, and she came anyway, and they sat in the boathouse with a space heater going and a thermos of coffee, and they talked, the unhurried talking to people with nowhere to be, about everything and nothing, about their families and their work and their memories and their theories. She told him about the Meridian situation in full, now that it was further along. The state attorney general had taken an interest, and there was an investigation underway that she was cooperating with fully, and it was going to be public and possibly unpleasant, and she was ready for it. She told him all of it, the whole complicated, true thing. He listened, said it sounded hard, said she was handling it right, said that. She told him about the new contracting process for the clinic expansion, which was moving faster than she'd hoped, and which was genuinely exciting in the way that her mother's work had been exciting, in the way she had been too exhausted and too guilty to let herself feel for almost 2 years. He told her about his daughter coming for Christmas. He told her about the conversation he'd had with his son, the first real one in a while, about what the future looked like, about whether there was a way to build something here that would outlast the current challenges. And his son had had ideas, good ones, things Jerry hadn't thought of. He told her about a morning on the water, alone, in the early December cold, when he looked up at the clouds and tried to use Nora's system and had gotten it completely wrong, but had felt, in the trying, like she was there. "That doesn't sound wrong to me," Vivian said. "No," he said. It didn't feel wrong. Christmas came. She went to her apartment in Chicago, and cooked dinner for herself and Marcus and his husband and her old friend Diane, who had been trying to get her to go somewhere tropical for 5 years. She told them about Harrow's Point. She told them about Jerry. Not everything. The right amount. Diane, who had known her since college and was constitutionally incapable of saying the obvious thing when a subtle one was available, said, "He sounds like someone who knows where the quiet is." "He does," Vivian said. "You've been looking for the quiet for a while." Diane said. "I know," Vivian said. "Are you going to keep going up there?" Marcus asked. "Yes," she said without hesitation. He smiled. "Good." She called Jerry on Christmas afternoon. He was at his son's place in Atlanta, and his daughter had flown in, and he sounded more like himself than she'd heard him, loose and warm, and occasionally drowned out by what sounded like a large family argument about a board game. "I'm calling it a bad time," she said. "Call again tonight," he said, "after we settle the Monopoly thing. Someone is cheating, but we can't prove it." "Is it you?" she asked. A pause. "Call tonight," he said. She laughed until the apartment felt less quiet. January. The Attorney General's investigation into Douglas Hale became public, as she had known it would. There was press coverage. Her name was in the articles, as both the complainant and the target of various comments from Hale's lawyers, who had chosen the strategy of suggesting that Vivian had orchestrated the investigation for competitive reasons, which was both insulting and easily disproven. She had been prepared for this. She handled it with a calm that surprised even her board, a calm that had been, she knew, building since November, since a dock and a thermos, and a man who said, "Just feel it. It won't kill you." It didn't kill her. There were 3 days that were genuinely brutal. She did not call Jerry during those 3 days because she didn't want to use him as a buffer against difficulty. She was trying to feel things, not route around them. But on the 4th day, when the worst had passed, and she was sitting in her office at 7 p.m. feeling wrung out and clean and okay, she called him. "How are you?" he said. "Wrung out," she said. "And okay." "In that order?" "Yes," she said. "The wrung out had to happen first." "Yeah," he said. "That's usually how it works." She told him about the week. He listened. He said the right things, which for him meant mostly just listening and asking the questions that help her hear herself. "The foundation is okay," he said. "The foundation is more than okay," she said. "We broke ground on the first new clinic yesterday, the one that was supposed to happen 18 months ago." "That's your mom," he said. "That's my mom," she said. He was quiet for a moment. "Nora would have wanted to be at that groundbreaking," he said. "She loved that kind of thing. She would have cried." "I might have cried," Vivian said. "Did you?" "A little," she said. Into my phone. "Nobody saw." "I saw," he said. "You told me." She smiled. "When are you coming back?" he said. "Valentine's Day weekend," she said. "Is that too on the nose?" "I don't know what that means," he said. "It means, is it too obvious?" she said. "The symbolism." "I don't care about symbolism," he said. "Come whenever. I'll make lunch." "Good sandwiches?" she asked. "They're getting there," he said. "They're already good," she said. "They were terrible," he said. "I know they were terrible. You don't have to." "They're getting better," she said. A pause. "Yeah," he said. "They are." She came for Valentine's Day weekend, and she told no one where she was going except Diane and Marcus, and she drove to Harrow's Point in the February cold with the heater going, and a book she had been meaning to read for 6 months, and she arrived Friday afternoon to find the dock freshly repaired. He had replaced 2 boards over the winter. She could see the new wood, and the boathouse tidy, and a thermos of coffee on the camp table with a note that said back by 4, "Help yourself." She sat on the dock in the cold with her coffee and watched the lake, which was partly frozen at the edges and entirely itself in the middle, gray and deep and endlessly patient. She thought about everything that had happened since October, the board meetings and the investigation, and the groundbreaking and the long drives, and the bad sandwiches getting better, and the clouds over the lake, and the letters in the boxes, and the thing Jerry had said about Grace moving through people and not from them. She thought about her mother, in the good way, in the way that had become the way. She thought about how Margaret would have done this specific situation. Sitting on a dock in February waiting for a fisherman to come back from the hardware store, and she thought her mother would have done it exactly like this. Just sitting, just being in it, Not managing it, not positioning it, not calculating the outcome. Just being there, present in the cold, with the coffee on the dock, in the small, remarkable fact of her own life. He came at 4 as promised. He had 2 sandwiches. She took one. It was good, really genuinely good. She looked at him. He said nothing. She said nothing. They sat on the dock in the February cold and ate their sandwiches and watched the lake. And the gull was there. It was definitely the same gull. She had decided it had a particular entitlement that was identifying. And Jerry tore a piece of bread, and the gull took it and was immediately and inevitably replaced by 3 more gulls. And she laughed and he laughed. And the thing between them, the careful, tentative, real thing, moved from tentative to something with a little more weight behind it, a little more ground under it. And neither of them said that was happening because neither of them needed to, because they were both full people with their full lives, and they knew what a solid thing felt like when they were standing on it. Spring came, the way spring comes in that part of the world, like a negotiation. Cold one day, warm 2 days, cold again, then a morning when you wake up and something has shifted for real, and you know it the way you know things that happen in your body before they happen in your head. Vivian was in Harrow's Point for that morning. She had been there since Thursday. She was staying through the weekend, which was new, and on Saturday she walked down the dock at 5:30 by herself, in the dark, just to see, and the air smelled like lake water and new grass, and something cold that was becoming something warm, and she stood on the dock and she thought, I want to stay here, not permanently. She understood her life. She was not someone whose life could be in Harrow's Point full time, not now, not in the shape it was currently in, but she wanted to stay. Longer than a weekend. She wanted to sit on this dock in more mornings and watch more seasons change over this water and hear more of Nora's theories and eat better and better sandwiches and let the thing between her and Jerry become whatever it was becoming at its own pace, with the care it deserved. She was thinking about how to say this when she heard his truck. He came down to the dock and found her standing there in the early dark. And he stood beside her, and they looked at the lake together. You're up early, he said. I wanted to see the dark part, she said, before the light. It's the best part, he said. I know, she said. I'm starting to know. He handed her a coffee. 2 creams. She had not had to ask for this in months. Jerry, she said. Yeah. I want to come more, she said. More than weekends. I'm working on how to make that possible, and I think I can get there, but I wanted to tell you I'm working on it. He was quiet for a moment. What does that look like? He said. I don't know exactly, she said. That's the honest answer. I know I can work remotely for large chunks of time. I know Marcus could run the day-to-day better than he already does, which is very well. I know, she paused. I know this dock and this lake, and you are becoming one of the main things. And I don't know how to make the logistics work yet, but they're not a reason to avoid saying what's true. He turned to look at her. One of the main things, he said. Yes, she said. He looked at the lake for a moment. Nora would have had something to say about this, he said. What do you think she would have said? He thought about it, really thought about it. She would have said you should have told me earlier, and also she would have said it was exactly the right time, he said. Both of those would be true. Both, Vivian said. Yeah, he said. She had a gift for things being both. The horizon began to lighten. The first bird started. The lake went from black to dark gray to a gray that had a little blue in it. I'd like you to meet my daughter, he said, when you're ready. She talks about the Cole Foundation a lot, and she's going to put the pieces together instantly, and she's going to have a lot of feelings about it, and you should be prepared for that. I'm prepared for that, Vivian said. She's going to try to involve you in the sustainable packaging thing, he said. I'm also prepared for that, Vivian said. And my son is less, he paused. He holds things closer. It'll take him longer. He's protective. Of you? Vivian said. Yeah. That's good, she said. That's how it should be. He nodded. My friends are... She thought about Diane and Marcus. They're going to be extremely happy and act extremely casual about it, and completely fail to act casual. That sounds manageable, he said. It's extremely manageable, she said. They stood on the dock in the early spring morning, 2 people with their full lives and their full grief and the growing, careful, real thing between them, and the light came. What she didn't know, standing on that dock in the spring, was that the thing she was building with Jerry was going to be tested, that the quiet, incremental, honest thing they were building was about to meet a complication she hadn't seen coming. She found out on a Tuesday in April, back in Chicago, in a call from a journalist. The journalist was from a national magazine, and she had been doing a story on the Cole Foundation's response to the Meridian situation, which was a legitimate and fine thing to write about. And Vivian had done the interview 2 weeks before and had been straightforward and precise about all of it. The call was about something else. "Ms. Cole," the journalist said, "I need to ask you about a trip you took in October to Harrows Point, Michigan." Vivian went still. "Yes." "Were you aware," the journalist said, "that the development company currently seeking to acquire the Harrows Point waterfront is a subsidiary of Meridian Health Solutions?" The room did something. Vivian sat very still and let the information land. Meridian, the waterfront, the man in the fleece vest, the license committee, and the carefully manufactured pressure. All of it threaded together, connected. Douglas Hale had been after that waterfront, and she had ended up on that dock by what felt like accident, and she had been fed by the man standing between Douglas Hale and what he wanted, and she had driven back to Chicago and blown up the Meridian partnership, and now she was trying to understand what that meant about the chain of things. "When did you find this?" she asked the journalist, her voice entirely even. "Yesterday," the journalist said. "I wanted to ask if you were aware of the connection when you terminated the partnership." "I was not," Vivian said, "and I'll need to verify what you told me before I comment further. Please send me what you have." She ended the call. She sat in her office for about 3 minutes, doing the things she had learned, feeling what she was feeling, which was a complicated knot of shock and a dark irony, and something that was almost too large to categorize. Then she called Marcus. "I need everything we have on the Meridian subsidiaries," she said. "Full corporate structure, all of it, as fast as you can get it." Marcus had it on her desk in 2 hours. The development company was there, third-level subsidiary, obscured through 2 holding companies, the kind of structure designed to be difficult to trace. She would not have found it on her own. The journalist, apparently, had a source in the Attorney General's office. She read the documents twice. She thought about the man in the fleece vest in Patty's diner. She thought about Jerry saying they'd been circling for 2 years. She thought about the license committee and Tommy Reese, who golfed with the development company's rep. She thought about Jerry Broussard, who had no idea that the man threatening his grandfather's waterfront was the same man Vivian had been dealing with for 6 months, who had no idea that the dock where he had fed a stranger and shared his last catch was entangled, from an entirely different direction, in the biggest professional crisis of her year. She thought about how it would look. She thought about how it would look to Jerry. She had to tell him, not because the journalist was going to, though she was, but because she'd been building something with Jerry that was predicated on honesty, on the full true thing, and this was a full true thing, and he deserved to hear from her. She called him. He picked up on the second ring, which meant he was done for the day, probably at home, maybe making dinner. "Vivian," he said, "what's wrong?" She hadn't even spoken, and he could hear it. "Something came up," she said. "I need to tell you something, and I need you to let me get to the whole thing before you say anything." A pause. "Okay." She told him everything. The journalist, the subsidiary, the corporate structure, the connection between Meridian and the development company that had been after his waterfront for 2 years. She told it clearly and without softening and without managing it, the way she had learned to tell hard things. When she finished, the line was quiet for a long time. "Jerry," she said. "I'm here," he said. "I'm thinking." She waited. "When you came up in October," he said, "the first time, you didn't know about the waterfront when you came." "No," she said. "I had never heard of Harrows Point. I came because I needed to be somewhere nobody knew me. And you heard about the waterfront situation in the diner." "Yes." "After you'd already decided to terminate the Meridian partnership." She stopped, thought about the timeline. He was right. She had called Marcus to set up the board meeting the afternoon of the first day, before she overheard Patty and the fleece vest man, before she knew any of it. "Yes," she said. "Yes, that's right. I made that decision. I found my way to that decision on the dock that morning, before I knew anything about the waterfront." "Okay," he said. "Jerry, I want you to understand that Vivian, he said, I hear you. I need you to believe that this isn't. I know, he said, because if you thought... Vivian. His voice was quiet and steady and completely sure. I fed you fish on a dock when I didn't know your name. You drove 400 miles and sat on a dock because you were lost. None of that was planned by anybody. I know that. A pause. The rest of it is a coincidence of the kind that happens when a man who does harm the world does enough of it, that eventually it shows up from two directions at once. She exhaled. You okay? He said. Working on it, she said. I know, he said. You always are. She laughed a little. The journalist is going to publish, she said. Our names will both be in it. They'll connect the dots. Co-Foundation, Meridian, Harrow's Point. It'll be a story. What kind of story? The true kind, she said, which is complicated and doesn't fit in a headline. Those are the only interesting stories, he said. Your daughter is going to find out, she said. She's going to find out anyway, he said. She follows the Foundation news. I know. I'll call her tonight, he said, before she sees it. She thought about that, about him picking up the phone to call his daughter and say, I need to tell you something. Jerry, she said. Yeah. Thank you for... Don't, he said gently. For letting me explain, she said. You didn't need my permission, he said. You always would have told me the truth. I already knew that about you. She held the phone and looked out the window of her office at the Chicago skyline, which was beautiful and enormous, and very far from a dock on Lake Michigan, and a man who paid attention. I'll be there Thursday, she said. I'll be on the dock, he said. The article came out on Wednesday. It was, as she had predicted, complicated. The journalist had done real work. The corporate structure, the subsidiary connections, the timeline of the waterfront development pressure. It was a solid piece of reporting. The headline was not quite right. It implied a more direct connection between her termination of the Meridian partnership and the waterfront situation than actually existed. But the article itself was more careful, and the timeline she had provided the journalist was in it. And the truth was visible to anyone who read it carefully. She got calls all day, her lawyers, her board members, 3 other journalists, 2 senators who were interested in the healthcare conflict of interest angle, and Diane, who said, This is remarkable. Are you okay? And also this is going to be a documentary someday. She told everyone the truth. She did not manage the story. She said to everyone who asked, I went to a small town to think. A stranger on a dock fed me fish and shared a kindness I didn't deserve. I drove home and made a decision I should have made months earlier. The Harrow's Point connection was not something I knew about. These things are both true and unrelated, and related in the sense that sometimes the universe is more organized than we give it credit for. One of the senators, a woman from Minnesota, who had been trying to pass conflict of interest legislation in healthcare for 3 years, called to say she was going to cite the Meridian case in her next floor speech. Vivian said that was fine. She said use the true version. Always, the senator said, and meant it, and Vivian liked her immediately. Thursday, she drove to Harrow's Point. The dock was clean. The new boards from winter were already weathering to match the old ones. The camp stove was set up, the thermos ready. Jerry came in at 7:30 with 12 fish, his best catch in a month, and he looked up when he saw her, and he looked tired in a particular way of a man who had been talking to journalists and his children and the whole town for 2 days. But underneath the tired, he was himself, solid and grounded, and there. How is it? She asked. My daughter cried, he said. The good kind. She's been following your foundation for 3 years. She couldn't believe. He shook his head. She'll be insufferable about it. Forever. Just so you're prepared. I'm looking forward to it, Vivian said. He handed her the coffee. 2 creams. The development company pulled back. He said, casual, starting to clean the fish. Called Sander Kessler yesterday. Said they were reconsidering the project. Vivian looked at him. Meridian's under investigation, she said. Yes, he said. Funny timing. It is, she said. He looked up at her. My grandfather's waterfront is safe, he said. For now, for a while, for a long time, she said, if I have anything to say about it. You've had plenty to say about it already, he said. A meal shared, she said. He smiled. The good one, the infrequent one, the one that rearranged his face. Yeah, he said. A meal shared. They ate on the dock. She had brought pie from a place in Chicago she liked, a proper bakery, packed carefully, and she set it on the table, and he looked at it and said, "You brought pie to Patty's town?" "It's not for Patty," she said. "It's for you." He tasted it. He considered. "Patty's is better," he said. "I know," she said. "I just wanted to bring you something." He ate the whole piece. She met his daughter in June. Her name was Claire, and she was 31, and she had her father's directness and her mother's, apparently, complete lack of restraint about feelings, and she arrived on a Saturday morning and shook Vivian's hand, and then immediately said, "I have to tell you that I volunteered at your Portland clinic for a year, and I read everything Dr. Cole ever published, and I'm going to try very hard not to be weird about this." "Take your time," Vivian said. "I'm already being weird about it." Claire said. "You're doing fine," Vivian said. They went fishing, all three of them, which was Claire's idea and which she was, unlike Vivian, naturally gifted at, and which she executed with competitive relish that made her father look at her sideways and say, "Where did this come from?" And she said, "Mom taught me before you were paying attention." And something moved across Jerry's face that was complicated and sweet, and Claire reached over and grabbed his arm briefly, quick and matter-of-fact. And Vivian looked away to give them. The moment. Later, back on the dock, Claire said to Vivian, "He's different. Since you. Not different, he's still himself, but," she thought about it, "lighter. He's lighter." "He's done that for me, too," Vivian said. Claire looked at her. "I know," she said. "I can see it." A pause. "My mom would have—" She stopped, started again. "She would have liked you. You're the kind of person she liked. She had a radar for it." "Your father says that," Vivian said, "that she had a radar for people." "She did," Claire said. "She never missed." They were quiet for a moment. "He hasn't laughed like that in 4 years," Claire said. "Like he did this morning, when you couldn't figure out the reel. He laughed until he almost fell off the boat." "I figured it out," Vivian said. "Vivian," Claire said, "you had it backwards for 10 minutes." "I was going through a learning curve," Vivian said, with great dignity. Claire looked at her. Her eyes went bright. "Yeah," she said. "Okay. Yeah, you're good. You're really good." His son, Marcus. Different Marcus. Vivian's Marcus was simply Marcus. This one was a son. Came in August with his wife, and he was, as Jerry had predicted, measured. He was 34 and built like his father, and had his father's way of looking at you directly, though where Jerry's directness was warm, the son's was watchful. He watched Vivian carefully all weekend. On Sunday afternoon, when Jerry and his daughter-in-law had gone to get groceries and Vivian was helping with something in the boathouse, the son came and leaned against the doorway. "He seems good," the son said. "He is good," Vivian said. "He was not good," the son said. "For a long time. After Mom." "I know," she said. "I want to make sure," he said, "that he's not just—" He paused, looking for the word. "That he's not just happy because something new is happening. That it's real." Vivian put down what she was holding. "Your father is the least self-deluding person I've ever met," she said. "If he is happy, it's because he has assessed the situation honestly and determined that it warrants happiness." She looked at the son directly. "And I'm the second least self-deluding person I know, and I'm saying the same." The son looked at her. "She would have been protective of him, too," he said. "Mom, she was protective of him even though he's the kind of person who seems like he doesn't need it," Vivian said. He stopped, looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, exactly." "I know," she said. "I see it too. He needs it. He just doesn't ask." The son was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "He used to look in the rear-view mirror every morning when he left for the lake." He stopped. She didn't say anything. "He was looking for her," the son said. "Every morning. He stopped about 2 months ago." She held that. "I don't know what that means," the son said. "I'm not saying." "I know what it means," Vivian said quietly. "And I know what it doesn't mean. He'll always be looking for her. It's just—" She thought about her mother, about the way Margaret had become a presence rather than an absence. The way love becomes something you carry rather than something you've lost. The mirror changes. What you're looking at changes. But you don't stop looking. The sun was quiet for a long time. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay, yeah." "She would have been proud of you," Vivian said, "for asking." He looked at her, startled. "That's something she would say," he said. "I think she said it to him enough times that it got into the air," Vivian said. "Still there." He exhaled, looked at the lake. "Okay," he said. "I'm glad you're here." "Thank you," she said. "That means something." "It should," he said. "I don't say things I don't mean. Dad's fault." "Good fault," she said. "Yeah," he said. "Good fault." September. 1 year after the first dock. She drove to Harrow's Point on a Thursday, as she always did, and she sat on the dock in the early morning, as she often did now, and she waited. He came in at 7:30, 12 fish, steady and good. She had brought 2 things with her. One was a frame, a proper one, and inside it was a copy of the letter from the girl in Georgia, because you ought to grow up, and in the margin, in red pen, her mother's handwriting. This is why. The original was in the Cole Foundation's archive now, properly preserved, but she had made a print of it, high quality, the red pen vivid and real. She had it wrapped in paper. The other thing was a card, which she had written and rewritten 4 times before getting it right, and which said, in her precise handwriting, "You showed me what it looks like when a person chooses to keep the door open even when the grief is enormous. I've been trying to do the same. I don't know all the logistics yet, and I'm not done figuring out how the full thing works. But I know it works because I've been watching it for a year. Thank you for the fish. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for saying what Nora said about meals. Thank you for paying attention. I intend to pay attention back, for as long as you'll have it. V." She handed him the wrap frame when he came up from the boat. He unwrapped it. He was quiet for a long time, looking at it. She waited. "This is the real one," he said. "Copy," she said. "Original is in the archive, but the handwriting is real. The red pen is real." He held it in his enormous scarred hands. "This is going on the wall of the boathouse," he said. "Good," she said. He looked at her. 1 year, he said. 1 year, she said. "You were sitting right there," he said, nodding at the spot. "Shoes off," she said. "Looking like I've been crying for 22 months. You look like someone who needed fish," he said. "I needed fish," she confirmed. He made coffee. 2 creams. She didn't have to say it. They sat on the dock in September morning. The light good, the lake good, the gull there, their gull. She was certain now. She had named it in her head. She was not going to say what she'd named it. And the water moved the way water moves when it has been moving for longer than any of us and will keep moving for longer than any of us. And it doesn't mean anything except itself, which is enough. "I've been thinking," he said, "about building something." She looked at him. "The waterfront," he said. "The boathouse and the dock. We've got the access rights. We got the space. I've been thinking about a program. Teaching kids to fish. The kind of kids who don't have," he paused, "who don't have a grandfather who did it. Who don't have the thing that gets passed down." She was quiet, listening. "I've been talking to Claire about it," he said, "and my son, and Sandra Kessler about the nonprofit structure. And," he looked at her carefully, "I wasn't going to ask you. Why not? Because you do this for a living, and I didn't want you to feel, Jerry, obligated." "Jerry," she said, "stop." He stopped. "I've been waiting for you to ask," she said, "for about 4 months." He looked at her. "A meal shared," she said. He exhaled, shook his head, but he was smiling. "I've got some thoughts about the structure," she said, "and I know some people who fund this kind of program. And I know what I'm doing, and I won't take it over. And it'll be yours, your vision, your boathouse, your grandfather's dock." She looked at him. "I'll be the resource. You be the thing." "The thing," he said. "The thing," she said. "The whole thing." He went still, just for a second, the way he'd gone still in the boathouse months ago, when she'd used Nora's line back to him. Then he said, "Yeah, okay, let's build something." They built it. It took 8 months and a lot of phone calls and one very memorable meeting between Jerry and the program director of a Chicago-based youth foundation that resulted in a partnership that neither party expected but both came to love. The program was called, in the end, Nora's Door. Jerry had called it that without ceremony, without explanation, just written at the top of the planning document one evening. And Vivian had looked at it and thought of what he'd said about grace moving through people and not from them, about keeping the door open. Nora's Door, she said. Yeah, he said. Perfect, she said. It launched the following spring. 12 kids the first session, ages 10 to 16, from communities in 3 counties that had the kind of relationship with the outdoors that mostly meant they hadn't had access to it. Jerry taught them everything, knots, nets, the cleaning and cooking, the patience, the particular philosophy of a person who goes to the water every day and knows that some days you get 12 fish and some days you get 9, and some days you get nothing and you go home and try again. He did not teach from a curriculum. He just went to the lake and brought them. On the second morning of the first session, a 14-year-old girl from Flint caught a walleye the size of her forearm, and Jerry helped her bring it in, and she held it in both hands and looked at it with an expression of absolute pure delight. And Vivian, who was there because she was always there now, watched Jerry watching the girl, and she saw on his face a version of the feeling that she had put there over a year ago when she caught the small fish and held it up, and she understood that things had come full circle in a way that only real things do, in the way that cannot be designed, only recognized. She photographed the girl with the fish. She photographed Jerry's face. She would never show either photograph publicly. They were for her. That evening, after the kids had gone home, she and Jerry sat on the dock and ate dinner. He cooked properly, salmon from a fish he'd caught that morning, and it was extraordinary. And the water went through its evening colors, and the gull came and got its piece of bread and left with its characteristic lack of gratitude. How did it go? She asked. Good, he said. It went really good. The Flint girl, she said. What's her name? Amara, he said. She's going to come every week. She told me that. I told her that was the plan, and she said no. I'm going to come every week, even if it's not the plan. Vivian smiled. She's going to be a fisherman. She's going to be whatever she decides, he said. But she's going to know how to feed herself. Off the water, off the land, whatever she can find. She's going to know that. That's what you're teaching, Vivian said. Under the fishing. The fishing is the fishing, he said. What's underneath it is, he thought about it, that you can always make something. That there's always something to work with. That you don't need much to make enough. She looked at him. 9 fish, she said. He met her eyes. 9 fish, she said. The sun dropped. The lake went gold. The boathouse behind them had a new frame on its wall. This is why, in red pen, in Margaret Cole's handwriting. And the dock under them was solid. Her grandfather's original planks and her father's 1987 extension and the new boards from winter, all of it present and layered and holding their weight. I want to tell you something, she said. You keep saying that, he said. Every time I learn something new. This is a different one, she said. He looked at her, waiting. I'm happy, she said. Not working toward happy. Not okay, not getting there. Happy. He was quiet. That's the first time you said that, he said. I know, she said. I waited until it was a full word, not a partial one. He looked at the lake, then at her. Me too, he said. For the record, me too. She held that. We can't use happy again for a while, she said, or it loses its weight. I know, he said. 1 deployment per year. 1 deployment per year, she said. He handed her the last of the dinner, and she ate it, and the evening came, and the gull was gone, and the water was dark, and the dock was solid under them, and the door between their lives, the one they'd been finding since a cold morning in October, stood open, 2 years after the dock. She was in Harrow's Point for a full month. The foundation had hired a deputy director, a woman named Serena who was extraordinary and who Vivian had taken 8 months to find and trust, and who was now running the day-to-day with a capability that made Vivian feel, for the first time in years, like the things she built could breathe without her for a while. She worked from the boathouse. She had a desk in there now, pushed against the wall under the frame with her mother's handwriting, and she worked in the mornings while Jerry was out on the water, and when he came back they had coffee and worked on whatever needed working on. The Nora's Door paperwork, or the dock maintenance, or the season planning, or just sat and talked, and in the afternoons she usually walked. The kind of long, aimless walking she had discovered was the equivalent for her body and her mind of what the lake was for him. Harrow's Point had gotten slightly less wistful. Nora's door had brought attention to the area. Good attention, the human interest kind, and a few things had changed. The old movie theater, now church, had been bought by a couple from Milwaukee who were turning it into a live music venue. A small art gallery had opened near Patty's. There were more people on the streets on weekday afternoons. Jerry said the fishing was better this year. He said it with careful hope. The hope of a person who knows that things can also get worse, who does not take the better lightly. Patty had put a new sign in the window. Best pie in Harrow's Point. Vivian agrees, and she's been everywhere. Vivian had protested. Patty had said it was already laminated. She was on the dock one evening when her phone rang. It was Diane, calling with the specific energy of someone who has news. "I'm going to tell you something," Diane said, "and you're going to think it's too much, and I need you to just let it land." "Tell me," Vivian said. "The Attorney General's office settled the Meridian case today." Diane said, "Douglas Hale, personal fine, substantial. The subsidiary development company is dissolved. The waterfront project is officially dead." Vivian sat with that. "There's more," Diane said. "Tell me." "The settlement included a provision. He negotiated it, apparently, or his lawyers did. I don't understand why he agreed to this, but there's a community fund. Part of the fine goes into a community investment fund for the areas where Meridian operated inappropriately. 3 counties in Michigan are on the list." A pause. Harrow's Point is in one of those counties. Vivian stood up from the dock. She stood there with her phone and looked at the lake and felt something enormous and complicated that she was going to need a moment to sort through. "How much?" she said. Diane told her. It was enough for 10 years of Nora's door, fully funded. "Vivian?" Diane said. "I'm here," she said. "Are you okay?" She stopped. She thought about the word she had agreed to deploy only once a year. She thought about a different word. "I'm grateful," she said. "That's what I am." "That's not like you," Diane said. "It's becoming more like me," Vivian said. She ended the call. She stood on the dock and looked at the lake. The gull was somewhere. The light was going. The water was doing what it always did, which was be enormous and patient and entirely itself. She went to find Jerry. He was in the boathouse working on something with a level of concentration that usually meant he was also thinking. And she came in, and he looked up, and he read her face. "Good news or complicated news?" he said. "Both," she said. "They're the same." She told him. He listened. He was quiet for a while. 10 years, he said. "At minimum," she said. He looked at the frame on the wall. Her mother's handwriting. "Margaret Cole and Nora Broussard," he said. Somehow connected in a settlement that came from a man neither of them would have liked. "Grace moves through people," Vivian said. "Through people," he said. "And through processes, apparently. And through attorneys general." "Whatever door fits through," she said. He shook his head. But in the way he shook his head at things that were too much and also exactly right. "Amar's going to be here another 10 years, he said. "She's going to be teaching it in 10 years, Vivian said. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, she is." He came and stood beside her in the boathouse, and they looked at the frame together, and outside the lake moved, and the evening birds were loud, and somewhere a car went by on Crane Street, just a car, just ordinary, the ordinary sound of small town continuing. "I want to tell you something," she said. "I'm ready," he said. She looked at him. "I want to stay," she said. "Not just for the month. I want to figure out what it looks like to have this be. Home. Home and Chicago both. A life with 2 centers. I know that's complicated. I know there are logistics I haven't." "Vivian," he said. She stopped. "I extended the boathouse desk," he said. "Last Tuesday." She looked at him. "I added another 3 feet," he said. "Made it a 2-person desk." She was quiet for a moment. "When did you do that?" she said. 3 months ago," he said. "I was waiting for you to get there." She looked at him. The man who paid attention. The man who made better sandwiches. The man who kept the door open. The man who had fed her fish when she needed it and never once asked her, and be anything other than exactly what she was. "You built me a desk," she said. "It needed extending anyway," he said. She laughed. He smiled, the good one, the infrequent one. "The Go," she said. "I named it." He looked at her. "You named the Go." 3 months ago, she said. "What did you name it?" "Margaret," she said. "She has opinions, and she shows up without announcement, and she takes what's offered and doesn't say thank you." He looked at her for a moment. "Nora was afraid of birds," he said. "Nora was very afraid," he said. "From childhood. All birds. She would not have enjoyed this arrangement." "That's—" Vivian looked at the Gull, visible through the boathouse door, sitting on the dock railing with his characteristic entitlement. "That's both funny and a problem. Nora would have gotten over it," he said. "For something she wanted. She was practical. Something she wanted," Vivian said. He met her eyes. "Yeah," he said. "Something she wanted. What we want to tell you, before we leave them on the dock in the evening light, is this. The story did not end with the settlement or the desk or the name Go, or the month in Harrow's Point that became the shape of how they lived. Stories like this one don't end. They keep going, in the daily, unremarkable ways that love actually exists. The coffee with 2 creams and improving sandwiches, and the large-eared dog on the street who still ran to Jerry and now, finally, ran to her, and the children in the Nora's Door program who grew up to be people who knew how to make something from what they had, and the frame on the boathouse wall, and what it meant to walk past it every day. What we want to tell you is that Vivian Cole never stopped running the foundation. She ran it differently, with Serena's help and the board's full engagement and the knowledge that it could breathe without her, which made it breathe better. But she never stopped. Margaret's work was still her work. That didn't change. What changed was that she had somewhere to go at the end of the day. She had someone to call during the hard weeks, and someone to sit beside during the good ones. What we want to tell you is that Jerry Broussard went to the lake every morning. He did not stop. He fished, and he ran the program, and he fixed things that needed fixing, and he made sandwiches that got steadily better, and he called his children, and he missed Nora every day in the specific and undramatic way that you miss a person who is a whole thing. Missing someone is not the same as being stopped by them. He had learned that. He had been learning it since before Vivian arrived, but she had helped him learn it faster. What we want to tell you is that a meal shared is never half a meal. That 9 fish fed 2 people, and the second person went home and told the truth, and the truth made space for other things to grow. That grace does move through people, and through docks, and through small towns, and through cold mornings, and through completely terrible sandwiches that someone eats with enthusiasm because the person who made them was paying attention. What we want to tell you is that the most radical thing you can do for another person is pay full attention. Real attention. No agenda. Just full presence. For whatever they are in the moment you encounter them. What we want to tell you is that Vivian went back because she needed to see what happened when you stayed. What we want to tell you is that she was right to go back. The last thing, a morning in October, exactly 2 years after the first morning, almost to the day, she was on the dock before him, as she often was now. The October light was doing what it does, the low gold thing, and the lake was dark and serious the way it gets before the cold come for real. He came in at 7:30 with 14 fish, his best haul in 2 years, and she helped him tie off, because she had learned to do that, and he handed her a cup of coffee without asking, because he didn't need to ask, and they stood together at the dock's edge and looked at the lake. "Tell me something about Nora I don't know yet," she said. It was a regular thing. Still, after 2 years, the supply was not exhausted. She thought it never would be. He thought about it. She had a theory about the dock, he said. Specifically this one. She said that a dock is the right kind of threshold. Not a door, not a gate, not a fence. A dock. Something that extends towards something, rather than separating from it. She said the right thresholds in life do that. They don't keep things out. They move toward. Vivian looked at the dock under her feet. She said that's why she always felt okay watching me leave from here, he said. Because I wasn't leaving toward nothing. I was leaving toward something. And the dock made it literal. She was quiet. She sounds like she understood things very deeply, Vivian said. She did, he said. She thought carefully about things that most people walk past. Vivian thought about her mother, about the box of letters, about the red pen. "Tell me something about Margaret," he said. She thought about it. "She used to say that the best gift you could give someone was to remember what they told you," Vivian said. "Not just that they said something, but what they said, the specific thing. She said being remembered accurately is a form of being loved." He looked at her. "Two creams," he said. She met his eyes. "Yes," she said. He held her gaze for a moment, steady and clear and fully present, the way he always was. "I remember everything you've told me," he said. "For the record." She looked at him. "This man, this dock, this lake, this morning." "I know," she said. "I remember everything, too." The water moved. The light held. Margaret the gull arrived on a railing, full of opinions, demanding bread. Jerry tore a piece and tossed it. 3 more gulls appeared instantly. Vivian laughed. He laughed. The dock extended toward the lake, which extended toward the horizon, which extended toward everything. And the morning continued, the way good mornings do. Not with a resolution or an ending or a title card, but with coffee and the ordinary extraordinary fact of 2 people on a dock, paying attention, together, with the water in front of them and enough fish, and the door held open and all the time there is. This story is dedicated to everyone who has ever been fed when they needed it, by someone who didn't have to, and to everyone who has kept the door open. That's the whole thing. That's always been the whole thing.